Here's a statistic that should stop you as a business owner in your tracks. 80% of your net worth is tied up in your business, but only 20% of businesses will ever sell, which means 8 out of 10 of you who are listening to me right now, everything you own could disappear. Not because you didn't work hard, but because you didn't build a business that could survive without you, and more importantly, that somebody would be interested in investing in. So today I'm going to pull together 3 of my most favorite conversations, and we're going to dig deep into this exact problem, and more specifically, how do we fix it? So let's dive in. So there were some statistics that grabbed me at my core, and I share this story. So for the first 20 years of my entrepreneur journey, I started and sold 3 companies. One was a landscape company. I started at the age of 15, my very first business, sold it when I was 21. My next business was a consulting company where I helped dentists actually buy practices and flip them and sell them. And then I found myself in the insurance world, working in the financial services in the infancy, and I ended up selling that practice. And I was struggling with what I was going to do with my own life, my own journey, being successful, very successful in those 3 areas. What do I do next? And here I am, Frank, sitting on a West Virginia mountaintop. I live in the hills of East Tennessee. It's beautiful Smoky Mountains here. And I'm just up the range a little bit up in West Virginia. And I'm talking to this dear friend now. And he said, Justin, I'm 57, 58 years old, and I'm broke. I'm like, what do you mean you're broke? He said, dude, I've been working for 30, 40 years as a business owner. And all I have to show for it is a paid off house, fancy vacations, hot rod cars, nice motorcycles, and a lot full of heavy equipment that's paid for. And I'm like, what do you mean that's all you have to show for it? And I said, you have a beautiful family. And we talked about those other aspects that you and I were just talking about. He was focused on this money thing. He's like, I cannot sustain my life, Goodbread. I cannot. If I get hit by the proverbial truck, my family's destitute. There's no way that they can sell everything I have with recapture tax and things of that nature and have enough money to sustain my life. I'm literally living vicariously through my business. Whenever he made that statement, Frank, I came back and I was looking at my own life, looking at the previous 3 years or previous 3 businesses and saying, if I'm going to dynamically change my family, and we'll talk about kind of the reason this mindset came about, but if I'm going to change my family's legacy for the rest of my life, I'm going to have to do things differently than I've done the previous 20 years as a business owner. I do not want to be this individual in my late 50s saying, I'm broke. What I discovered is for most of us as business owners, 80% of our net worth is tied up in our business. Especially those of us in the service industry, which encompasses about 28 million of us as small business owners. About 80% of our net worth is our business. And because we're so selfless, we give our money away, we live vicariously through our business, and we don't do what so many of our colleagues might in the W-2 world. We don't invest in our 401ks. We don't pay off our properties. We don't buy assets outside of our business. We take our cash and we turn it back into our company. And we buy that new piece of equipment, or we invest in this new product, or we invest in this new marketing idea, knowing that we can grow our companies. For business owners, 80% of our net worth is our business, statistically speaking. So unlike our W-2 employees or our W-2 counterparts who perhaps have been investing money into their 401k all these years, or perhaps they bought real estate, many business owners, statistically speaking, we have invested back into our companies. We've sacrificed our own livelihood for the care of our customer, our team members, our communities, our charities, everything but ourselves. And statistically speaking, 80% of our net worth is our business. And that's the statistic where your baby's ugly, because whenever the time comes, whenever either by purpose or by default, either by choice or by default, you decide that you've got to leave your business, whether it's a health issue, an age issue, an endurance issue, statistically speaking, only 20 to 30% of business owners are able to transact their company. So if currently we have 30 million business owners in the United States, with statistically speaking, roughly about 67% of business owners today are baby boomers, the rest of us are Gen X, in the small business world as a unit, we're looking at about $13 trillion that are supposed to transact over the next 6 to 7 years. Out of that, $8 trillion is just going to evaporate. So the book Your Baby's Ugly is around, look, you've got this asset, this business. Yes, you are working hard, but you've got to do the difficult work in order to make this business become ultimately a value play where somebody, as I often say on video, is willing to pay you some money for this business. And unless you do the difficult work, unless you look at your business through the lens of an investor, your business is going to be ugly to them. So that's the idea behind it. real life scenario happened this last week. In East Tennessee, there's this big construction fulfillment company. I gotta be careful. I'm trying not to give names, but they provide hard goods like wood and doors and tile and stuff to the trades. What has happened is they're now having a problem to where the product that needs to be delivered to the job site isn't on time. They tell the customer it's going to be here at this time, this day, and it's not there. We have a QC issue. We backtracked it back to the very beginning. Who the customer relationship person is getting flustered because they're like, look, I told the customer he's going to be here. We put in the order, but it wasn't delivered. Take it all the way back to the very beginning when they sold that particular contract. They had a disjointed throughput is what it's called. They had a disjointed process to where the salesperson wasn't relaying what the customer desired to the fulfillment people, to the customer service person. So all we had to do was to manage that system was we went into their software. In this case, it was a CRM style software or a workflow management software. Again, every industry is going to have their own specifics, but it was a workflow management software, and we found the disconnect. We fixed it in a matter of 30 minutes. But it wasn't until this QC person had gotten flustered that they felt like they were doing dishonest work for this customer because they told them they were going to be there and it wasn't there, that we couldn't backtrack and say, hey, your sales department isn't properly recording the data points for your fulfillment manager who's not following the data points for your end user. So every customer is going to be different in that area. Well, one of the underlying common threads there is they're all a service-based industry with recurring revenue. And so whenever we're looking at businesses, they may not have the exact same NAIC code or the same exact SIC code, but they are nonetheless the same type of business. Now, there is something to be said about working with somebody who's been in that particular industry. For example, right now, after being 20 years in the financial industry and reaching all sorts of national awards and accolades and scaling companies from startup to 8 figures and then taking an 8-figure business and doubling it in 18 months to a 9-figure business, there are some things I know in the financial industry that not many other people would know because I've been in that seat. However, there is some underlying methodologies that can be applied to every single business out there. The reality is for the practitioner, the owner of the company is ultimately who do we respect or who are we going to trust with the advice? And that's where the fall off is. Whenever we're looking at the exits of these various 3 different companies, they all had a multiple times a revenue number, whether that be EBITDA, EBOC, or NOI. So they all had a multiple times a revenue number. That's pretty much standard in the services industry. Again, the revenue number may be different. For example, the financial industry, it was EBOC, earnings before owner's compensation. In the dental business, it was EBITDA, and actually it wasn't even recasted EBITDA. It was just flat up EBITDA, earnings before interest, depreciation, amortization, and taxes. So it was very interesting calculation. Whereas in my landscape company, it was a multiple times NOI, net operating income. And that was the way each of those businesses worked, but it was still the same methodologies. Now, whenever we're looking at an exit, all the things would matter in the service industry. And we're going to deal specifically with service from this point forward in the conversation, because if we dive off into manufacturing or retail, there's some nuances there. But the vast majority, the 30-something million Americans who own businesses, the vast majority of us are service in nature. We have a good that we're trying to sell in exchange for currency, or we have a skill set we're trying to sell in exchange for currency. So in business, there are 8 areas of business: planning, leadership, sales and marketing, people, their team, operations, finance, and legal. Every company in the service industry has those same 8 areas. And there are 256 metrics in all the service industry world that drive the value of that business up. In Tennessee, we have a replica in Nashville, the Parthenon. It's a very interesting architecture, but there are a lot of pillars, if you know the Parthenon in your head, that hold up the roof. The same is true with business. There's a lot of things that hold up. You would recognize a few of them. For example, owner dependence. How many times have we heard as business owners, get out of the business, don't work in the business, work on the business? And I often say, yeah, but how do you do that? Or then we may hear things like, hey, you need to have recurring revenue. Okay, I get it, but how do I do it? Or we deal with things like, hey, we need to have a penetration type of a marketplace that if a buyer looks at our business, they say, hey, you're missing this particular market area. If we were to buy it and pour some cash into it, we could penetrate that and thus drive NOI or just drive margins up in the company. So there are 256 metrics in the business, but regardless if you're a landscaper or a dentist or a financial advisor or a doctor or a plumber or whatever you have as a business, if you could look at your business as an asset and realize there are different levers that can be pulled, which will drive the value of your company up, then you're on the right direction. Now it's a matter of, as you say, Sherpa, is who is it that you believe is best equipped to carry you to that next destination? You know what's interesting about us business owners is we do not buy information. We can get information everywhere. On my podcast, your podcast, Google, we become armchair quarterbacks. What ends up happening is whenever somebody is intrigued with a coach or an exit planner or whomever we would decide to hire, what we're ultimately hiring them for is a process or a methodology that we can execute on. Can we use their methodology to shortcut us by either saving us time or money to our destination? So to answer your question, I walk them through what I call the freedom framework. But in that framework, there's a key things that most business owners have a hard time dealing with. So for example, if I were to ask you, whomever you are listening to this particular podcast, if I were to ask you, hey, where exactly do you want to be in 60 months? What does it look like? Tell me about it. I've yet to have a business owner who can articulate that very clearly. Most of us haven't even thought about it. We know we need to make a change, but we don't know where to go. So as the old saying goes, if you're aiming at nothing, you're going to hit it every time. So one of the hardest things that we have to deal with is where specifically are you driving your company, your family, and your future? And that's a very deep conversation to have. But then you go to the next one. Okay, well, cool. We understand where you want to be. Who are you best equipped to serve? Who specifically does your company provide the best solution for? So I live in East Tennessee. You probably already gathered. I love to hunt and I like shooting my bow and arrow. So I want you to imagine in your mind's eye, there's this target in front of you and right dead center, there's a bullseye. And then outside there's another ring. And you've seen these targets perhaps in the Olympics or somewhere else, but there may be 3 or 4 rings as you go away from the center of the bullseye. And the bullseye would score 10 and the next ring would 9, then an 8, then a 7, and so forth. Who specifically are you best equipped to serve is in the bullseye. And that's who we want to draft our entire company for. Now, here's where the fall off often happens. You know, whenever I fly commercial, I get on an airplane and the strap in, and you know what I'm going to say, the stewardess or whatever they flight attendants, I think they call them today, politically correct. They'll say, hey, in the case of emergency, oxygen is going to fall from the overhead bin and, you know, put your mask on yourself. If you're flying with an infant, put it on yourself first before you put on the infant. The reason for that is in the case of emergency, if you don't have the oxygen, you both are going to have problems, not just one of you. So take care of yourself so you can help others. The same is true in business. Again, we are selfless in the fact that we have the honor and privilege, and I say those words tactically. We have the honor and privilege to serve so many people. And the business owners that I work with, that I see, which is the vast majority, they are selfless in the fact that they will give everything away. The shirt off their back, they'll give their intellect, they'll give everything to the people they care about, which oftentimes are their team members, their passionate customers, perhaps vendors, their charities, their communities. But just like in that airplane circumstance, unless you pause for a second and take care, as you coined it, the mothership, unless you take care of that business, which takes care of everything else, unless you take care of that, the very people that you care about will be the very people that end up getting harmed. So whenever you're dealing with business and you're trying to create value and trying to create an exit strategy, what I often hear business owners say is, man, I love my team. I'll sacrifice for them. I'll charge hell with a water pistol for my team because they've been with me through thick and thin. Or I'll sacrifice my community. This is my town. I am the backbone of this town, whatever the business may be. They have this passion. But unless they do this right, unless they design this business, which by the way, a business is nothing more than a wealth creation tool for yourself or for your team or your community or for your charity. That's all it is. Even though we serve people, yes, I get it. It's there to create wealth. Unless you do it right, your team, they're going to end up being destitute. Perhaps you're overpaying them and they're not going to find the same job somewhere else. That town, unless you've built, if you're the central of that town, which I have several clients who are, especially in the Midwest, if you don't take care of that business, then your town, your primary business driver, you can end up harming that very community that you love or your charities. So yes, there is this aspect of like, man, I'm selfless in my ethos. I want to take care of my people, but just like that airplane example, if you take care of yourself first, then all the people that you care about, your family, your friends, your customers, etc., they'll be taken care of you if you build it properly. In my own story, after that West Virginia experience, I came back, walked away from $250,000 recurring revenue in the financial world, started a financial firm, business consulting firm, 49 months, had an 8-figure exit. And now I spent the last 3 years teaching business owners, hey, look, it's not too late. If you feel like you can't sustain your life because you've been so selfless and you're the backbone of your town, your community, your core, whatever it may be, friends, if you have the desire that you want to change your life for the rest of your life, you can do it in as little as 18 months. Well, friends, you've heard the truth. It's the truth that most business owners don't hear frequently enough. The cool thing is it's not too late. You can change your future. But if you wait, waiting is the most expensive decision you'll ever make. Now is the time, friends. Now is the time for you to start building value, not just income, but value. Take the next step. Move forward in your journey. Till next time, y'all make it a great day.